Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to do the middle grade book tag. This tag was created from Amanda at the Curly Reader a couple of years ago, and she has been one of the co-hosts for Middle Grade March for the past couple of years. And so I just discovered, though, like a couple weeks ago that she had created this tag. And so I'm really excited to do it this year to celebrate Middle Grade March, which is like one of my favorite bookish events or read-alongs or challenges, whatever you want to call it, that takes place on BookTube every year. So the first question is, what is the last middle grade book that you read? And I actually only read one middle grade book during the month of February, and that was Finding Langston by Klein Ransom, which is also highly recommended by Amanda. And this is Amanda's tag, so that's kind of funny. Anyways, so this is a book about a young boy, Langston, who moves from the deep south with his father to Chicago during the Great Migration, which was a time period that I really hadn't read very much about. So that was a really interesting aspect of this book for me. It also deals really well with the displacement that happens when you move, as well as grief at the loss of a parent and bullying. And the boy falls in love with Langston Hughes' poetry and the library. And yeah, it's just a really sweet little book. And if you haven't read it, you definitely should. The next question is, what is a middle grade book that someone read to you as a child? The book that I most vividly remember someone reading to me as a child that was a middle grade book was A Little House in the Big Woods by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I remember my mom reading this book aloud to me and my sister, and then I think I went on and read the whole rest of the series, but this was the only book that we owned as a child, and the rest I got from the library. And so I remember reading this book over and over and over again, but I really vividly remember the first time that my mom read it aloud to me. And I still really love this book. So if you've heard of Little House on the Prairie, this is the book that actually comes before Little House on the Prairie, when Laura and her family live in this house in the middle of the woods in Wisconsin. And Laura is 5 when this book starts. So it's very sweet and very fun to read about all the things that they were doing. And yeah, this one just really has a special place in my heart for that reason. The next question is, what was your favorite middle grade book when you were a child? And if you've been here for a while, you probably already know my answer to this, but there is a lot of middle grade books that are very nostalgic to me. I was obsessed with the Babysitter's Club books, with the Saddle Club books, with the Nancy Drew books, with the Ramona books. And so there were a lot of books that were series that I read a lot of. But when I look back on my childhood, the book that I read over and over again, probably the most, that I loved the most, and I loved playing and pretending the most as a child, was The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And this is one that I just reread last year because I read it aloud to my daughter, and it was so special to share this with her. And rereading it, it still retains all of just the beauty and magical elements of reading it the first time. And yes, it's wonderful. I love this book so much. It's about so much more than just the garden. It's about the growth of these children and them changing and who they're becoming. And it's really wonderful. And if you have not read this for some reason, I feel like most people have, but if you haven't read it, it actually fits a middle grade March prompt, which is to read a book with an orphan as a main character, because the main character, Mary Lennox, is an orphan who moves in with her uncle. And yeah, it's so good. The next question is, what is your favorite middle grade book as an adult? And this is kind of impossible to choose. I chose one because there was 2 that I was really thinking of, but one of them fits really well for a later prompt, and I didn't want it to be repetitive. So I actually did choose one, and that's Sweep, A Story of a Girl and Her Monster by Jonathan Auxier. This book is incredible, quite honestly. It's so good. It's about a girl who is a chimney sweep, and it was actually based on real historical events and how children were forced to become chimney sweeps and how many of them died and how terrible that was. But there's also this whole fantasy element to it as well. So there's so many things about it. And I really love Jonathan Auxier. He's probably one of my favorite middle grade authors. I've read every middle grade book that he has written and loved every single one of them. But this is definitely My favorite, although Sophie Choir is really high up there too, I absolutely loved that one as well, but this one edges it out just a bit. The next question is, who is your favorite middle grade author? And I did just mention Jonathan Auxier, and I would definitely say he's one of my favorite authors, along with Sharon Draper and probably like a whole bunch of other people I'm forgetting right now. But the author that I chose for this was Cornelia Funk, who wrote the Inkheart series. She also wrote Dragon Rider and Thief Lord and Igraine the Brave. I actually haven't read Dragon Rider yet, but I have read all of the other of her middle grade books, and I just love her. She writes primarily fantasy, and I just love the way that she writes. She is actually a German author, so all of her books are translated, so that's kind of fun too. So if you ever have a reading challenge where one of them is a translated work, this is excellent. If you haven't read Inkheart, you should. I never saw the movie. The movie came out, I think, when I was like a kid or a teenager. I want to say like a young teenager. And I never watched the movie, so I don't know how it stacks up to the book, but the book is excellent. It's so good, and it really is a book for book lovers because it's kind of about like people escaping from books and then being put into books, and yeah, it's really, really good, and you should definitely read it. And it does not get enough love as a like iconic middle grade series. Maybe it's not iconic enough for some people, but I feel like it's right up there in terms of like imaginative things with like Harry Potter and stuff, but it doesn't get the same recognition that that series does. Next prompt is, what is a middle grade book that you think should be required reading in school? And so this is my other favorite middle grade book, and that is Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper. So this book is about a young girl, Melody, who has cerebral palsy, and so she's unable to walk and she's unable to speak. And for a time, everyone thinks that she's also like mentally disabled, but her parents realize that she's not, and they really advocate for her. And she's able to get one of those machines that enables her to speak. Like she can type things into it and press buttons and it will speak for her. And once that happens, she's able to then be more integrated in some of the classes with other kids. And there's a lot of like kids not knowing how to behave around her, being uncomfortable, treating her badly, bullying her because she's in middle school. And I feel like this is a book that all children should read because I think that it helps with empathy and also helps them realize how it might feel to be the person who is struggling with this disorder or whatever, and how it feels when no one wants to be your friend and no one knows how to talk to you or treat you or whatever. And so I think that this is a really important book, and it's one that I am definitely going to make sure that my daughter reads pretty soon. My daughter's in 4th grade right now, and so I'm planning to make this required reading for her in 5th grade because I just think it's that important. So the next prompt is your favorite middle grade book cover, and I feel like this is a really hard one to choose also. I went with one that was just really whimsical and fun, and that's The Adventures of Miss Pettifor by Anne Michaels. So this is a story about a woman and her, I think it's 16 cats, and she uses like tablecloths and stuff. It's like hot air balloon type situation, and all her cats will link like their tails and it goes around to the back. And this is like a really sweet and witty and fun book, especially if you love cats, but it's also just like very adventurous and fun and lots of like punny play on words and stuff that I really, really enjoyed. But I think that the cover like perfectly captures like the feel and the whimsy of the story. So I decided to go with this one. And the last question is, what is your favorite middle grade book to screen adaptation? And to be honest, I am not a huge fan of adaptations. I must always spend most of my time watching it, comparing it to the source material, and being far too nitpicky about it. So the last adaptation I remember watching was like the newest adaptation of the BFG, and I didn't really like it. So, and that was years ago. Like that was a really long time ago. So I think that my favorite book to screen adaptation is like a classic Disney movie, and that's the adaptation of 101 Dalmatians. I actually just read the book. I didn't even know it was a book, and I just read it last year and really, really loved it. In fact, it was like one of my favorite middle grades of the year. I can't remember if it made it into my top video. I don't think it did, but it was like definitely within like the top 20 of all of the books that I read last year, which is saying something because I read close to 200 books. So that's really saying something that ended up that far up the list. But I feel like I watched the movie many times as a child, and I feel like the movie really captures so much of like the joy and the funniness and the sweetness and the adventure of the book. I think it does a really good job at that. Having read the book now, I actually do feel like the book is better, which I mean, it almost always is, but I just really, I feel like the adaptation did a really good job in following the plot pretty closely and just capturing the overall wonderfulness of the book. So I'm going to tag some people to do this. I don't necessarily always do that, but I'm going to this time because I actually had some people in mind while I was filming this that I would love to see do this tag. So I'm going to tag Kelly from Cozy Reader Kelly, and Keisha from A Book Like You, and Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day, because all three of them are really big middle grade readers, and I would really love to hear their answers to these questions. If you guys have not already done this tag, maybe you have because all of them have been on BookTube longer than me, but they're all people that I would just really love to hear their answers. And if you are watching this and you have a BookTube channel and would like to do this tag, consider yourself tagged because I would love to hear your answers. And then also, if you don't have a BookTube channel, but you would love to give some of your answers to this in the comments, I would love to hear what some of your favorite middle grades have been. I would actually really love to hear too what your favorite book to screen adaptations are, because I can be kind of picky about that. And so a lot of times I don't even bother with more modern books that I have loved that have been turned into movies. I a lot of times don't even bother. So if you have some favorite adaptations, I would love to hear that too. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me. And I will see you again next time.